April 12th, 2013, fourth quarter against the Golden State Warriors. Down by 2 points, Kobe Bryant starts to drive towards the rim, and something snapped in his left leg. He had torn his Achilles tendon, and you could just tell by the way he looked how serious of an injury that it was. He walked to the free throw line, sank both shots, tied the game, and then walked off the court without any help. That night, before any of the press conferences, before the calls from friends and family, before any of it, he was already watching the film of the injury. To Kobe, yes, this was an injury, but it was also data. It was the same data that he had spent his entire career pulling from every opponent that he faced. He saw this moment as a moment to be studied. I've thought about that moment a lot, and it's impacted the way that I view and handle hard moments. See, most people in that situation would be devastated. Kobe was taking notes, and it's not a superhuman response. It's what happens when you've spent 20 years building a specific relationship with discomfort, when you've trained yourself to see everything, and I mean everything, including your own catastrophic injury, as information rather than a verdict. That relationship didn't start in the NBA. It started in Italy. When Kobe was a kid, his grandfather was mailing him boxes. This is a Sisu Lab series on the Mamba Mentality. Kobe was explicit about what that meant. It wasn't just a catchphrase. It wasn't a brand. It was a specific set of principles that he lived by every single day for 20 years in one of the most competitive environments on the planet. He talked about them openly in interviews, in his book, in the work that he did with young athletes after his playing days, because he believed that they were transferable, that they weren't just his, that anyone willing to apply them could use them. I believe that too. I believe that applied principles produce results, not sometimes, but consistently, because principles aren't opinions. They're patterns that work regardless of who you are, what you do, or what you're trying to build. So over the next several episodes, we're going to pull the Mamba mentality apart, piece by piece. The obsession, the focus, the fearlessness, the details, the competitiveness, the adaptability, the resilience. In each episode, we'll cover one principle and what it looked like for Kobe, and look at how it can be applied in your life, whether you're leading a team, building a business, or just trying to become a better version of yourself. It starts in the dark, because that's where it was all built. Joe Jellybean Bryant played professional basketball in Europe after his NBA career ended, which meant Kobe grew up in Italy, far from the NBA, watching his dad play in leagues that most Americans had never heard of. His grandfather, back home, would record NBA games off of the American television and ship them overseas. The boxes would arrive and Kobe would disappear. He'd sit there rewinding the same sequences over and over and over again. And his dad would sit with him and break things down and say, watch this guy and how he handles the ball. And one time he told him about a guy named John Battle, and he was showing him how effective he was at using his left hand. Now, most of you may not even know who that is, but it wasn't Magic Johnson. It wasn't Larry Bird. It was John Battle, just an Atlanta Hawk with a really good left hand. And Kobe, a kid in Italy with a box of VHS tapes and nothing but time, watched that sequence until he understood exactly how John Battle used it. That's exactly what obsession looks like up close. A kid in Italy studying a journeyman NBA player's left hand because his dad said, watch this. By the time Kobe was 18 and in the NBA, that habit had become something else entirely. before a preseason game against Dallas. And I'm not talking about a playoff game. I'm talking about a preseason game. He had already spent hours watching Jimmy Jackson and Jason Kidd, studying things like their tendencies, their preferred spots, their tells. The first time in that game that Jackson tried to blow past him, Kobe stole the ball. He knew exactly where Jackson was going. Later, as Kobe talked about it, he said, "It was only a preseason game, but I prepared for it like it was a state championship." Tim Grover trained Michael Jordan. He's trained some of the best athletes who ever lived, and he worked with Kobe from 2007 to 2012. And he says Kobe worked harder, but MJ worked smarter. From 2 a.m. to 4 a.m, that was Kobe's focus time. If a gym was open at 3, he wanted to work on something, he'd be there. Grover would have to physically pull him out so he could get some rest. Grover said that of all the things that they worked on, the most challenging was simply getting Kobe to stop. The hardest thing about training Kobe Bryant wasn't getting him to work harder. It was getting him to rest. Before games, he'd put on his custom earpieces and would turn on his DVD player that he carried everywhere. Whether he was on the padded table in the training room, whether he was on the floor as he stretched, the Lakers director of video services said, hands down, he's the biggest video fiend we have ever had. Every game, Kobe got 8 to 12 minutes of edited film compiled just for him. The player he'd be guarding that night, every habit, every preferred spot, every tell. To Kobe, it was a blueprint because he said that if something goes down, it's not because you haven't seen it before. Everybody has tendencies, and if he scores 40 on a Monday, he's going to try to do it on Tuesday, and you have to take him out of his spots. That's the key, and that's why he did it. Summer 2008, Olympic training camp in Las Vegas. The NBA season had just ended. Kobe called Tim Grover, and he wanted to add cycling to his training. Grover assumed that he meant stationary bikes, but Kobe quickly said, "No, I want to ride outside in Las Vegas in the desert." So Grover had to call hotel concierge, track down some rental bikes, and map out routes that were in the Nevada desert that didn't exist in any program anywhere. So they went out at night, riding in the dark, finishing around 2 a.m. Grover said that Kobe wanted to be out there before the sun would come up, and then he would want to take a break and ride back when the sun was at its peak. "If I'm going to do this, I want to be in the most uncomfortable temperature and environment out there. If you're going to ride, then you're going to ride," is what Kobe said. Some of his Olympic teammates heard about the cycling and they wanted to come too. Grover told them, "No, you don't. You do not want to go." And so they didn't go. So the rest of the team, I'm talking LeBron, Carmelo, Dwight, CP3, they were already asleep. Kobe was in the desert. And that's exactly where he wanted to be. In the heat, in the dark, in the discomfort that nobody else was seeking out. Building something that would show up later when the lights were on and it mattered. Kobe said, "You have to work hard in the dark to shine in the light." Most people look at Kobe's preparation and call it discipline or even call it work ethic. And while you can call it that, to Kobe, it was a little bit more than that. Here's how he described it. "I never thought about my daily preparation. It wasn't a matter of whether it was an option or not. It was. If I wanted to play, this is what I have to do. So I just show up and do it." He didn't feel like he was sacrificing. He felt like he was doing the only thing that made sense given how much he cared. Most people treat preparation as a tax. You pay it so that you can have the result. The work is the cost that gets you to the performance that you actually want. Kobe didn't separate them. The work in the dark wasn't what he did so he could get somewhere. It was where he actually lived. He said, "If you really want to be great at something, you have to truly care about it. If you want to be great in a particular area, you have to obsess over it. A lot of people say they want to be great, but they're not willing to make the sacrifices necessary to achieve greatness. They have other concerns, whether important or not. They spread themselves out, and that's totally fine. After all, greatness is not for everybody. Greatness, although accessible to everybody, is really not for everybody. And I think when Kobe says that, he's not being harsh. He's actually being honest about the fact that most people have other things that matter more than this level of commitment to one thing. If you want the internal experience of mastering something completely, not just the trophies, not just the feeling, then the work in the dark is not optional. It's the entire thing. Kobe's obsession was seen in the way that he watched film. And Kobe's film study changed over the course of his career. When he was young, he watched to learn what was there, what a player would do, the player's moves, the player's tendencies, the patterns that they kept going back to under pressure. That was the foundation, the catalog of what exists, understanding it, and then using it against them. But at some point, something shifted. The biggest element that changed over time, Kobe said, was that I went from watching what was there to watching for what was missing and what should have been there. And then I went from watching what happened to what could have and what should have happened. He wasn't studying reality anymore. He was studying the gap between what a player did and what a player could have done, what the best version of that player should have done. And then he started using that gap as a map. He brought the same lens to himself. Not just what did I do well, but what should have been that wasn't. Where was the gap between who I am right now and who I am becoming? And that question doesn't have a final answer. But that was the point. Kobe would say things like, I have self-doubt. I have insecurity. I have fear of failure. I have nights when I show up to the arena and I'm like, my back hurts. My feet hurt. My knees hurt. I just don't have it. I just want to chill. We all have self-doubt. You don't deny it, but you also don't capitulate to it. You embrace it. That's not a man who had it all figured out. That's just a man who decided that not having it figured out wasn't going to stop him. Kobe's obsession cost him things. He was honest about it, and probably more honest than people who tell his story tend to be. He would say things like, I wasn't willing to sacrifice my game, but I also wasn't willing to sacrifice my family time. So I decided to sacrifice sleep. And that was that. He talks about how there were periods in his marriage that were hard. Seasons where the relentlessness that made him great also made it harder for people to be around him. He talked about it like a tightrope. He said, there's a fine balance between obsessing about your craft and being there for your family. It's akin to walking a tightrope. Your legs are shaky. You're trying to find your center. Whenever you lean too far in one direction, you correct your course and end up over leaning in the other direction. And that's the dance. You can't achieve greatness by walking a straight line. And him admitting that is so important because it's easy to look at Kobe and build a highlight reel about his obsession. The 4 a.m. sessions, the championship rings, the 81 points, and turn it into a really clean package story about outworking everyone. But Kobe himself never pretended that it was clean and nicely packaged. He carried the obsession and the cost of it at the same time for his whole career. He was clear-eyed about both. The Mamba mentality isn't a gift. It's a choice. And every choice like that has a price. The honest question isn't whether you want the results. It's whether you're willing to actually pay. As you're listening or watching this, you're probably not preparing for an NBA game or an NBA career. I know that. Your version of this looks completely different. Different domains, different stakes, different demands on your time. But Kobe said something that cuts across all of it. When the game is on the line, I'm not asking myself to do something I haven't done 1,000 times before. That's what preparation actually does. It doesn't make the moment easier. It makes you someone who has already been in that moment 1,000 times in private, so that when it happens in public, it's just a Tuesday afternoon. The calm you want when the pressure is on, the clarity, the ability to execute when everything feels like it's on the line, that doesn't come from willing yourself through the moment. It comes from having built something in the dark that nobody saw and nobody applauded and nobody even knew was happening. So think about wherever you want to perform at the highest level and ask yourself, honestly, what is your version of the 4 a.m. cycling session? Not literally, but what is the preparation that most people in your position would skip? What would give you an edge that nobody else around you has? Not because you're more talented, but because you were willing to go somewhere they weren't. Most people prepare enough to show up. Kobe prepared until showing up was the easy part. One more story. When Kobe was 13, a magazine published a ranking of the best young basketball players in the country. He was 57th. He took that magazine, he studied it. He found out who the other 56 players above him were and what teams they played for, and he started following them, following their tendencies, tracked them down, and made sure that when his team played any of them, he was lined up and he was able to play against them, one by one. And he didn't do it to embarrass anyone. He did it so that he could find out where he actually stood, so that he could close the gap between 57 and 1. The only way he knew how, by going directly at it. That's the thing about Kobe Bryant that gets buried under all the mythology, all the championships, the 81 points, the Achilles game. Those are what the light shows you. What the light doesn't show you is the kid in Italy watching John Battle's left hand on a VHS tape, the 18-year-old rookie studying preseason opponents like it was the NBA final, the man in the Nevada desert in the middle of the night, because if you're going to ride, you're going to ride. Kobe Bryant said, you have to work hard in the dark to shine in the light. That's where everything gets built. The dark. The dark is where results are built. The question isn't whether you have what it takes to shine. The question is what you're willing to do when nobody's watching. That's the Mamba mentality. Before I close, I want to say something that isn't so much about the principles or the application. Kobe Bryant died on January 26, 2020, and he was just 41 years old. He was with his daughter, Gianna, and several other people in that helicopter that went down in Los Angeles. Gianna was just 13 years old, and she was on her own path to greatness, and you could see it already in her. I remember where I was when I found out, and I think most people remember where they were when they heard the news. And what I keep coming back to all these years later isn't the championships, isn't the points, isn't any of the things that will live in the record books forever. It's what he gave people who never met him. The way he made an entire generation, myself included, believe that the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming can be closed if you're willing to do the work that the closing requires. He didn't just perform at a level that most people never reach. He showed his work. He talked about the fear, the doubt, the cost, the obsession. He wrote it all down. He gave interviews about it. He wanted people to understand not just what he did, but how and why, because I believe that he genuinely believed that the principles behind the Mamba mentality were transferable, that they could work for anyone willing to apply them. It was so generous of him to do that, because a lot of great people take what they know to the grave. Kobe spent his last years trying to give it all away. This series is in part a thank you for that, for everything he put into the world, for Gianna, who deserved more time, for his family having to move on without him, for the standard that he set, not just in basketball, but in what it looks like to truly care about something completely. We're going to honor it by taking these principles seriously. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.